We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We got the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
Hey everyone, I'd like to start off by thanking everyone who's become a member, new members and subscribers, and some folks have recently joined us to help us get stuff done as we grow. Well, Canada's just elected a new Liberal leader, so what's next? At the Liberal convention Sunday night, 16-year-old Ella Grace Trudeau's speech in honor of her father brought tears and smiles of pride to everyone who watched.
Welcome, Ella Grace Trudeau. Amis libéraux, veuillez accueillir Ella Grace Trudeau.
Hi, everyone. I've come here to talk to you about your Prime Minister, your leader, but to me, it's just Dad. Je crois qu'on sait tous que être ministre, c'est pas la job la plus facile au monde. Les longueurs de travail, le stress, l'attention médiatique. But I can tell you, it's not that easy to be the kid of a Prime Minister either. I've been trying hard to live the life of a normal teenager, but I think you can imagine it's not that simple of a task. La sécurité, les règles, le drama m'ont empêché de me sentir vraiment libre ces dernières années. Le nombre de fois où les gens m'ont donné des nouvelles de lui comme si c'était pas de mon père qui parlait. J'ai dû choisir mes amis avec soin et parfois douter l'intégrité de certaines personnes. Je vais pas vous mentir, c'était pas très facile. I've had some great conversations with my dad about the difficult situations I've lived through, and he never failed to make me feel better. He listened, and more than that, I knew he heard me, he understood me, because he lived through all that. The only difference is that back then there was no social media. Imagine constantly seeing your dad or even news about him as you scroll through your feed. I gotta say, I'm looking forward to seeing more of him at home and less of him online. But I would never trade the last few years for anything. Dad, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud to have seen you fight for our country, for what you believe in, for what we, in this room, believe in. Fier de t'avoir vu te battre pour ceux qui sont dans le besoin. I'm extremely grateful to have lived these experiences and grateful to those around me who have made it even just a little bit easier. Je suis tellement chanceuse d'avoir pu vivre autant d'expériences incroyables, de rencontrer autant de personnes extraordinaires, de voir autant de beaux endroits et de belles choses. I will never forget the memories I've made, it be at Harrington Lake, on official trips, or even just at home. And I'm really looking forward to making some new memories of a different kind. My brothers and I have shared our dad with you for the past 12 years. Now, we're taking him back.
And the legacy of the Trudeau family has been passed down through generations now, ever since Trudeau mania swept the nation in the 60s with his infamous father, Pierre, who I grew up under. He was the first of three sons born to Pierre and his flower child bride, Margaret, or Maggie T, Margaret Trudeau. And Justin came into the world on a Christmas Day in 1971 and has been seen as the heir apparent ever since. But the Trudeau family has also dealt with a lot of sadness and tragedy, including the divorce, public divorce, and Margaret's struggles with mental health, and the death of the youngest son, Michel, who died in an avalanche in 1998 while skiing in Kokanee Glacier Provincial Park. And when Pierre died, Justin, at his funeral in 2000, gave a very moving tribute and seemed to be no doubt then that he would one day fill his father's shoes as Prime Minister.
Pierre Elliott Trudeau. The very words convey so many things to so many people. Statesman, intellectual, professor, adversary, outdoorsman, lawyer, journalist, author, and prime minister. But more than anything, to me, he was Dad. We were the luckiest kids in the world. And we had done nothing to actually deserve it. It was instead something that we would have to spend the rest of our lives to work very hard to live up to. D'un océan à l'autre.
From one ocean to another.
United in our grief. To say goodbye. But this is not the end. He left politics in '84, but he came back for Meech. He came back for Charlottetown. He came back to remind us of who we are and what we're all capable of. But he won't be coming back anymore. It's all up to us, all of us, now.
His final speech on Sunday was a rough-throated but rousing farewell to much applause and cheers of Canada and elbows up from the crowd.
But tonight is about our future as a party, as a country. Now, I know that we as Liberals, as a government, often get criticized by our friends for not taking a victory lap after we get something big done. We do something really big, and then we move on right away to the next challenge. Because as progressives, as Liberals, we know there is always more to do. So it is important to take the time to reflect on and share the big successes. But not tonight. Not tonight, because when Liberals gather, we're always focused on just one thing. The work that still needs to be done to build a country that stays worthy of all Canadians. We're a country that will be diplomatic when we can, but fight when we must, elbows up. And make no mistake, this is a nation-defining moment. Democracy is not a given. Freedom is not a given. Even Canada is not a given. None of those happen by accident. None of them will continue without effort. It takes courage. It takes sacrifice. It takes hope and hard work. Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson first raised our beautiful maple leaf into the Canadian sky. It was much debated at the time, but Pearson knew well what we all know now, that our flag would serve as a unifying symbol that would define the next chapters in our national story. 60 years later, there are still so many more chapters to write. And I can tell you, the world is looking to see what Canadians will do.
Following a historic and characteristically acerbic speech from the former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, the votes came in with Carney winning by a landslide with 85% of the vote. So who is Mark Carney? Well, he was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. Don't hold that against him. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from Harvard, went on to study at Oxford, earned a master's degree and a doctorate. He held various roles at Goldman Sachs before joining the Bank of Canada as deputy governor in 2003. And in 2004, he was named as Senior Associate Deputy Minister for the Department of Finance in Canada. Carney was, in 2000, named Governor of the Bank of Canada, where he was responsible for Canadian monetary policy during the global financial crisis. And he led the Canadian Central Bank until 2013, when he was appointed as Governor of the Bank of England, a historic first, where he led the British Central Bank's response to Brexit and the early phase of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what makes Canadian voters want to choose a boring banker to succeed the charismatic Justin and his sunny ways? Well, the last few years have been tough on Canadians who've been struggling through the pandemic and or earlier with housing affordability crisis and no good paying jobs and the cost of living going up while a lot of essential services are overburdened. But blaming the government for those things is not a new thing. As one Quora user put it, Justin was Prime Minister during the pandemic, the worldwide inflation and an unaffordable housing crisis, so in a sense he's a victim of circumstance. That being said, higher regulation of the housing market could have avoided some of the pain. At this point, I feel no one else would have been better, but I also understand many think they can solve all of life's problems with a change of government. You could call that scapegoating, but really it's just the natural progression of politics. Brian Mulroney had one of the highest approval ratings in Canadian history when he elected. More than 50% of voters voted for him. 8 years later, his party was reduced to rubble. Fergus is trying to get in my shot or knock my camera over. Stop it, Fergus! No! The upheaval we saw during Orange Julius' first term was bad enough, but now he's back and taking aim at every one of America's allies and neighbors. He's really made us want stability and a drama-free political platform that projects strength and unity. Boring is how Canadians prefer their politics historically. Fergus!
Also, let's just say it, the charisma or lack thereof. Now, a lot of people are being turned off, at least when I'm reading online, people are a bit turned off by this. Other people don't care. I tend to lean with the people that don't care. I think we are in a situation right now where Canadians want somebody who is kind of boring. I don't think people want someone who's going to be too outlandish, too crazy, someone who appears like, can't really handle them. Canadians want someone who is a central banker, essentially. Now, I want to be clear. A central banker in tone. They don't necessarily need a central banker in policy. But we're talking about somebody who is, the former Bank of Governor in Canada under Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. That was during the 2008 financial crisis, then went to the UK to help them deal with Brexit as their central banker. And now he's here leading Canada. So this is somebody who has been around and is someone who you could argue is very boring by definition of being a central banker. And I think that is actually an asset for him in an upcoming election. He's also not pretending to be anybody he's not. Something about Trudeau that I think got on a lot of people's nerves, including my own, was just his cadence in his way of speaking. Very performative and almost soft-spoken, but speaking like this. There was just sort of a fakeness about him, even if he wasn't being fake, even if that's who he is. And to be fair, I still don't know who he really is. It's hard to know who Trudeau really is. But he just came off as somebody who was not being real. Mark Carney, for all of his faults, in terms of how he may view the world, is somebody who is not phony. He is who he is. He's a central banker and he speaks like one. So he's not pretending to be anything he isn't, like, say, Pierre Poilievre, who pretends to be for the working class and has an entire career in politics fighting on behalf of big business and corporations and the wealthy and fighting against working class labor rights. Like, the idea that Pierre Poilievre is for the working class all of a sudden, after we have a very clear track record of you not being for the working class, is just an incredible ruse that he was trying to pull on people. And some are falling for it because of the way he's speaking. Pierre Poilievre has a lot of correct criticisms of what is happening, but he doesn't have the actual solutions to the problem. And this gets to Mark Carney speaking on Pierre Poilievre, and I think he does a pretty good job at separating himself here.
Donald Trump is trying to weaken our economy, but there's someone else who, if he succeeds, will weaken our economy. It's Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre just doesn't get it. He is the type of lifelong politician and I've seen this type around the world, a lifelong politician who worships at the altar of the free market despite never having made a payroll himself. Pierre Poilievre would let our planet burn. This is not leadership. It's ideology. It's ideology that betrays what we as Canadians value, each other. It's an ideology that also represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how the economy works. We know that markets don't have values. People do. And we know as Liberals that it's our job to make markets, to make the economy work for all Canadians. These are the most powerful tool we've ever invented. They can find solutions to our greatest problems. And when the private sector, when the markets are governed well, they deliver great jobs and stronger growth faster than anything. But markets are also indifferent to human suffering, and they are blind to our greatest needs. So when they're not governed well, or not at all, they will deliver enormous wealth for the lucky few and hard times for the rest. So Donald Trump thinks he can weaken us with his plan to divide and conquer. Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him.
Liberals would do well to call a general election quickly. Ride this wave of unity as the opposition is spiraling in the polls, and Pipsqueak PP Poilievre is failing to convince anyone that he's not MAGA. Well, for now, Carney remains the PM designate, while the Conservatives play that same old song, blaming the Liberals and Justin in particular for everything while providing no plans or solutions. Sound familiar?
The Conservatives called a Parliament Hill press conference where reporters were given pictures of Carney and Trudeau together.
Mark Carney is trying to hide from his record over the last 5 years of advising Trudeau in favor of raising carbon taxes, money printing inflation, and blocking resource projects.
Not true, say the Liberals, who argue Carney will take the country in a new direction.
Change. Canadians, number one, sense that we need a leader of stature.
Conservatives argue the opposite.
He's just like Justin, and he's more of the same.
Mark Carney is the new leader of the Liberal Party.
With 131,674 votes.
But that doesn't mean that he's officially Prime Minister. Right now, he's Prime Minister designate. Here's what happens next. First, Justin Trudeau needs to officially resign as Prime Minister. He'll meet with Governor General Mary Simon to do that, and she'll invite the new Liberal leader to form a government. We don't know exactly when that will happen, but it's expected in the coming days. Then, Carney needs to name a cabinet and set a date to swear them in. He also needs to name staff for the Prime Minister's office, as well as key advisors. They will need to prepare for the next federal election, which could be called at any point once the cabinet is named. When Trudeau announced his plans to resign in January, he prorogued Parliament until March 24th. So Parliament could come back before an election is called. But Carney has inherited a minority Liberal government with no supply and confidence deal with the NDP and an opposition that's eager to boot the Liberals out. So the Liberal government is expected to face confidence votes right away. That could lead to a snap election. The campaign would last between 37 and 51 days, with Election Day landing on a Monday.
Well, I'm sure the process seems confusing to many of my American friends, and just imagine how infuriating it is for Donald Khan. He wants his rival Justin gone so he can try to wear down the new guy. Well, watch out, Donny boy. Carney plays goalie, and the hockey goalie metaphor is about sticking to values when faced with obstacles, being flexible and willing to change actions depending on the situation, and feels a parental role towards the team. Never threaten Canadians, eh? Elbows up!
Stay tuned for more on Political Drain Canadian Edition.
Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.